So I was going to do a video, of course, on well, what I could currently be described as the bizarre sewage crisis that is currently gripping the country. But then I realized that actually this is not really news, because this is again something that we reported 2 years ago now, when back originally Theresa May was talking about leaving the EU, leaving the single market. This also involved leaving various EU agencies, of which Britain would have to replicate roughly around about 70 different agencies, some of which, because again, we've been in the EU and have been sort of paying for that larger agency access, that aren't as big as they are going or need to be when we leave the EU. And of course, the government has not put any money into this. So, of course, what happens? This chemical shortage that is causing this dumping of more wastewater, it's going to have an environmental impact. And the thing is, because again, the agencies to check on this and to monitor this are chronically understaffed, again, because of Brexit and because Boris Johnson has refused, not only just Boris Johnson, but the rest of the Tories have refused to re-beef up these agencies to a level where they can cover the UK effectively and enforce these rules. We will see down the line, probably in a couple of months' time, some sort of environmental damage caused by the dumping of this wastewater. Like, that is a fact, and I can predict this will happen now. But what we're going to talk about today is, of course, the effects of the pandemic, especially in the north of England, because as we've said there before, Boris Johnson and many of his, northern MPs bang on constantly about wanting to, upgrade the north. Well, guess what? Because of during this, not only we've had more deaths in the north, we have had longer lockdowns, resulted in lower wages, and this has all but destroyed the idea that the Tories are going to level up the north. Because if you really seriously wanted to level up the north, now is absolutely the perfect time to do it. You've heard me talk before about trying to green the steel industry, which would be an amazing long-term project, which would not only guarantee jobs here in the north, but indeed grow the jobs in the steel industry and protect it for the future. But of course, the Tories aren't interested in doing that. And instead, I believe it was Sweden has stolen the march on this and started investing in a carbon neutral steel industry. So it looks like they're probably going to be the first country to do it. But as we've said before, any country that intends to do that, their steel industry needs long-term government support and funding in order to do it. And again, if you were serious about leveling up the north, that is one industry where you'll be looking at to help level it up. But of course, they never had any intention of leveling up the north. And the fact that the pandemic has made things even worse up here in the north, as we'll get into a moment, not a lot of people are going to be very happy. And trust me, at the next general election, where I've already said to a lot of people on here included, that look, the people in Hartlepool and all around the north who voted for those Conservative MPs to, quote, get Brexit done and, shall we say, get their money isn't forthcoming. And there are going to be a lot of angry people saying, well, hey, where's my money? Where's all this stuff you promised us? Hasn't been delivered on. So before I do jump into this article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So this comes from the London Economic, and the title is More Deaths, Longer Lockdowns, and Lower Wages, the North of England's Pandemic. Northerners were far more likely to die from COVID-19 and spent almost 6 weeks longer in lockdown, and were made more poorer than the rest of England during the first year of the pandemic, official figures have now revealed. Academics that have analysed government statistics which show just how much worse off it was affected, the North East, the North West, and Yorkshire and the Humber compared to the rest of England. Public health experts have said much of the blame of the increased mortality could be explained by the higher deprivation levels and worse pre-pandemic health in the north. The report commissioned by the Northern Health Science Alliance found this. People living in the north had a 17% higher mortality rate due to COVID-19 than the rest of England, and a 14% overall mortality due to all causes. The North's care home of COVID-19 mortality was 26% higher than the rest of England. And in the North, 10% more hospital beds were occupied by COVID patients than the rest of England. On average, people living in the North had 41 more days of the harshest lockdown restrictions than people in the rest of the country. The North experienced a larger drop in mental health well-being, more loneliness, higher rates of antidepressant prescriptions. Wages in the North were also lower than the rest of England before the pandemic and fell even further, whereas wages increased in the rest of the country. The unemployment rate in the North was 19% higher than the rest of England. And Dr. Luke Munford, the lecturer in health economics at Manchester University, said the pandemic has hit us hard and in all different ways. But our reports show that people living in the North were far much more likely to be hit hardest, both in terms of health and wealth. The fact that over the half of the increased COVID-19 mortality and 2/3 of all case mortality was preventable should be a real wake-up call. We need to invest in the health of people living in the North and ensure that they are able to recover from the devastating impacts of the pandemic. Clara Barnum, the professor of public health at Newcastle University, said, "Our report shows how regional health inequalities before COVID have resulted in an unequal pandemic. Higher wages for ill health and death and despair in the North. The economic impact of the lockdown is also looking likely to exacerbate the regional economic divide. The government's levelling up agenda needs to actually seriously address the health inequalities in the North for all generations." The report authors called on the government to boost the funding to northern hospitals to allow them to catch up, including of non-COVID care. Professor Ballman said the levelling up agenda needs to be centred on health. It cannot just be about trains and bridges. She said that there was an element of good news for the North in the report, which looked at March of 2020 to March 2021, showing a higher percentage of people had been vaccinated in the North than anywhere else, which, to be honest, is rather good. I'm glad that, that happens to be the case. But as we've said before, the North pre-pandemic was in a state. It was an absolute state. Compared to the rest of the country, we were lower in terms of wages, lower in terms of job creation, you name it. The North was heavily lagging behind. And we depended on a lot of the EU development grants to try and help us get out of this mess. Of course, that money no longer exists and has been replaced by the government's version, which, again, is not going to go to the areas that need it the most. And to the MPs that have walked around at 2019 saying that they were going to level up and ensure that Boris Johnson keeps his promise about leveling up, well, he doesn't certainly seem to be keeping his promise at all. Like I say, he gave that speech a couple of weeks ago, which was basically nothing more than hot air. And you can't keep that up because Northerners are already cottoning on to this fact that we are going to be worse off after the pandemic, and that the recovery, again, I've said this before, the recovery plan for the UK is pretty much non-existent at this moment in time. Whereas I look at countries like France, Belgium, and Holland, all have like 3 to 5 year plans of pandemic recovery. And that's not just the individual countries as well. The EU has also developed its own pandemic recovery fund, which will again aid those countries and those areas that are in need of it within the EU. And then you look at the UK and the Tory government just go, this is fine. This is fine. We'll carry on. We've said it before. We cannot carry on. The pandemic has exposed the true gaps, not only in capitalism here in the West, but especially in the UK versus those hard areas that have been hit the hardest. And the fact that, again, this Tory government that's been in power for so long has done nothing to really help these people. And if you're expecting Boris Johnson to actually help you, and you voted for him because you believed that getting Brexit done would help the North, and that you thought that Boris Johnson's plans to level up the North would would come into effect and work. Well, where are they? They're not there. You've been, once again, been lied to by a very smooth con artist. So, by all means, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.